As we tip into the afternoon, we'll start to see some showers breaking out, and as you head through the afternoon, they could be heavy and there could be a rumble of thunder in there. If you miss those, you'll do very well, but it's very warm. Top temperature 27 Celsius.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255.
BBC Radio Manchester.
I assure you it is just the way the stories came in. They weren't connected. Our two lead stories this morning, or in the bulletin just now, which said a man's been set on fire in Manchester, and the other one that said Joey Barton's just come out of prison. The two are not connected. Well, you know, he's not much of a burner, he's more of a fighter. Anyway, he's out. And apparently, according to the Daily Mail, so it must be true, it's on the back page, Kevin Keegan had the chance to make a stand for English football. Instead, he's invited jailed Joey Barton to play again. And he's bored? Furious. Shame on you, says the Daily Mail. Kevin Keegan's heading for a showdown with the Newcastle board after offering troubled Joey Barton a fresh start yesterday. Owner Mike Ashley, after months of trying to offload the player and then cut his £71,000 per week wages, is resigned to having Barton back on his release from prison, which, as we've just heard, is today. Well, what do you think? In the end, he's just a footballer, isn't he? It's not anything important. It's only a game. He's done his time. Now, there are many that do, you may want to make the argument that he should have done longer. He should have got punished more harshly. All sorts of things that should have happened, possibly. But we have to deal, surely, with what did happen. He got his sentence, he served it. He'd hoped to get released early a few weeks back, didn't he? On a tag, on one of them security tags, an electronic tag. But the probation service said, no, we don't want him. We don't want him coming out on a tag, because not only is he guilty of violent crimes, he's a violent bloke, he actually committed his most recent, they said last, but my bet it's not, he committed his most recent assault whilst out on bail. So no, he can't. He's got to do his time. So he's done his time, he's out. Should he be back playing football? You tell me. I don't know. In many ways, I don't really care. 0161 228 2255. The email address is radiomanchester@bbc.co.uk, and of course you can text 07786 206 951. And frankly, you can talk about anything. The subject matter is yours, and we don't mind either way. No, it's up to you. We honestly, whatever the subject, I'm happy to hear it. 0161 228 2255. I want you, if you will, to cast your minds back a few weeks ago. We had a bloke come on, and he made some fairly strong, his name was Derek, he made some fairly strong allegations about one of the polling stations at the local elections on the 1st of May. The allegation was that the seals on the ballot box were tampered with. That was the allegation. There was another allegation as well. The allegation was that some people were turned away from casting their vote because their names were not on the list of voters, although they were on the electoral register. So those two allegations were made. He's made those allegations to the returning officer for Manchester, that's Sir Howard Bernstein, the chief executive of Manchester City Council, and he came on here and made those allegations on here. He told me, now I got quite short with him on two occasions, because he tried to make these allegations on two occasions, and I got quite short with him and said, look, I'm not going to let you name names. It's one of the things we do on the programme for all sorts of reasons that I'm not going to bore you with. But we don't name names, generally. But these were very, very specific allegations. And we ended it with me saying, well, there is a process to use. There is a process of complaint. And he said, oh, I'm doing all that. So I said, well, let me know how it goes. He has let me know how it goes, or how it went. And frankly, I think there are some questions that still need answering. I think that a letter purporting to have been sent by Sir Howard Bernstein, Chief Executive of Manchester City Council. I have a photocopy of a letter purporting to be from that individual. I can neither say it is or it is not. I'm not a scientist, but I have a letter purporting to be from Sir Howard Bernstein to Derek, our caller, explaining the process, the incidents which led to the two allegations he's making, and explaining them away. Frankly, one explanation is iffy, and the other one, for me, is downright unbelievable.
Heather Stott, the best guess, and a no dull people guarantee.
Jenny Murray, she's one of the nation's best-loved broadcasters, and she's now put her life story down on paper.
A lot of women have very difficult relationships with their mothers. What I wanted to try and do was understand why a relationship could be as full of love as it was, and as full of resentment as it was.
Heather Stott, tomorrow morning from 9 on BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. Why should I make those comments and then leave them hanging in the air? Well, I am, and I've said this, well, I demonstrate how interested I am in politics, not from a party political point of view, but in politics and politicians, frankly. I demonstrate it in two ways. I sit in this chair and drone on and on and on about it hour after hour during the course of a week, a month and a year. And I've also stayed up late at night and presented BBC Radio Manchester's election broadcasts, all bar one, since I arrived here 20 years ago. So that's one every year, occasionally more than one, but almost always one a year. So I've presented 20 election programmes. I really am interested in politics. I think our electoral system, it's not by any stretch of the imagination perfect, not by a long, long way. I think it's probably one of the better ones. I personally have views about how it could be improved, but I think it's one of the better ones. And most importantly, I think overwhelmingly it's an honest, honourable process. But, and it's a big but, things do go wrong. First of all, there has been skullduggery performed, much of it in Northern Ireland, some of it rather more local. But there has been skullduggery. But the process of the election, the casting of the vote, now in Northern Ireland they used to have a phrase, vote early and vote often, because people used to personate. They used to vote in the name of a dead person, and then vote in the name of another dead person, and then go and vote in their own name, casting 3 votes, 2 of which were invalid. That went on. But the ballot box itself was sound. The ballot box itself was secure, because there is a process designed to keep it secure. And it's that process that has been called into question today. Derek, the complainant, I don't normally give surnames, but I will on this occasion, and I know he won't mind. His name is Derek Adams. He actually stood for election in one of the Blakely wards, the higher Blakely ward. He stood for election there, and he lost. He stood as a BNP candidate. Now, his allegation is that there is skullduggery. I don't see any evidence of that. But there is evidence that processes have gone awry. Processes have not been adhered to. Here's the main one. The main one is that the seals that are supposed to be on the ballot box were tampered with. That was his allegation. There was another allegation that a number of people had presented themselves to legitimately cast their vote and had been turned away. The only case that's gone through on that is one such person did approach, their name couldn't be found, and they were turned away. But later they returned and the name was found and they cast their vote. So that's fine. But at some point today, I'm going to read you parts of a letter from Sir Howard Bernstein where he attempts to explain not that the tampering of the seals on the ballot boxes did not take place, but that it did, and that there is an irrational explanation for it. Stay tuned, because I think you'll be interested when you hear the rational explanation. It involves what I can only describe as conjuring, magic. The explanation, for me, is absolutely unbelievable.
Talking sense every lunchtime. Allan Beswick and you.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Well, before that, we're supposed to be a phone-in. Let's talk to somebody. 0161 228 2255. Neil in Bolton. Hiya, Neil.
Hi, good morning, Alan.
Good morning, sir.
I was just listening to some of the politicians about the Scottish National Party's victory on last Thursday.
Yeah.
And they sort of said, oh, I will have to listen more and this more. I mean, you can't blame anyone in Scotland for voting for a party that's brought in free school dinners, care for the elderly without paying for it, free education, and other things. That, I mean, if any party in this country brought that out, they'd get all the votes too.
Well, that is interesting, isn't it? People are saying that they voted in the Glasgow election. They voted because they were disgruntled at Labour, and they weren't voting for the SNP. They were voting against Labour. But you've got a very, very good point, haven't you?
Well, honestly, I mean, if any government said to us now, you'll get all these things, well, you couldn't help but vote for them, could you?
Particularly if, as is the case in Scotland, they say you'll get all these things and the English will pay for them.
Well, absolutely true. I mean, I don't know how they do it, to be honest, but I mean, nevertheless, they've done it.
It is an extraordinary state of affairs that in Scotland, if you need care as an elderly person, as a retirement pension, you get it free of charge. In this country, you have to pay for it, or your assets are stripped in order to fund it. You get free prescriptions, which they also get in Wales, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting thought. Do you think Gordon Brown is about to reintroduce those things, which, of course, his predecessors in his political party introduced all those years ago?
I think, to be honest, I don't know how you pay for it, but possibly, if they sort of said, right, we'll scrap the identity thing, and I'm in favour of the identity thing, but perhaps in prioritising, perhaps they should scrap that and spend some money on doing some of those things, and perhaps scrap Polaris missile. They could do it if they wanted to by scrapping some of the things. Whether that is right to do that, I'm not really sure. But I mean, I think it would be a very, very big vote winner.
Well, certainly it will.
By any party.
Well, yes, and the evidence is that it has, in your view, come to play in Scotland. Good on you, Neil. It's a very good point. It'd be interesting to see whether Brown and the Labour Party think...
I mean, even Cameron could do it, but no one suggested it, have they?
No one has suggested it, no.
No?
Extraordinary.
All right.
Good on you, mate. Neil says the SNP, Scottish National Party, won in Glasgow, in the Glasgow by-election, because of the policy in Scotland of free, I've forgotten the name of it, further education. So if you go to university and you're from Scotland, you get free education. If you're from England, and I think the case applies in Wales as well, if you're from England or Wales, you have to pay. We hear tale of students leaving university with £30,000 worth of debt. They owe £30,000, which they will be required to pay off during the course of the next 2 decades. So it'll be 40 years of age. An interesting age for some people. 40 years of age before they've paid off their student debts. Quite an extraordinary state of affairs. Unless they're from Scotland. My wife's niece, fabulous girl, brought up, in fact, I think she was even born there. But if not, she moved there as a very young child. Yeah, I think she was born there. Born in the Isle of Man. Now, the Isle of Man is not part of the United Kingdom. The Isle of Man has free education. Their daughter, my wife's niece, goes to Liverpool University studying psychology and doing very well, thank you. And all her fees are paid for by the local authority in the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man, for crying out loud. It's a tiny little insignificant rock halfway between here and Ireland, and it can afford to provide those kind of benefits. England, I do mean England, it appears, cannot. Nor also can they provide free prescription charges and care for the elderly at no cost to the individual. Quite extraordinary. It's a very good point that Neil makes. Maybe the people of Scotland said, actually, the SNP, the politics in Scotland are such that we're doing very nicely, thank you. And they have the added advantage that it's paid for by the rest of Britain. Quite extraordinary. 12:20, the BBC GMR... No, BBC... Good Lord, how old am I? BBC Radio Manchester News headlines from Faye Rusco.
A man's in hospital with 40% burns after he was locked in a van and set alight in Stockport. The former Manchester City footballer Joey Barton's been released from prison after serving just under half of a 6-month sentence for assault. And in sport, the Rugby Football League says it's satisfied the new stadium for Salford City Reds will go ahead, despite the developers going into administration. Manchester's weather fine and hot, but there's the chance of thunderstorms later, highs of 27 Celsius.
That senility kicks in earlier and earlier, doesn't it, really?
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, it's a really good afternoon out there, actually. No slow spots still, no accidents or incidents, thankfully. Just a quick reminder to where a few of our roadworks are across patch. So in Haywood, first of all, Worsley Street still closed off for gas main work at its junction with Wilton Grove. Worsley Street will be closed for a short distance, ongoing until the 4th of next month. Meanwhile, Station Road and Milne Road closed as well in both directions. That's for sewer works around Dale Street, so there is a diversion sign for you. In Eccles, Victoria Road, no change, still closed off as well for sewer works between Harwich Lane and Clarendon Crescent, not causing traffic to queue at all. Bridgeman Place as well in Bolton, still closed off after that fire last week. Between Bradshaw Gate and Carlton Street, demolition work continues following that tower block fire on Thursday morning. Traffic does seem to be coping well nonetheless. Any other problems that you spot? Call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Maria Jackson.
You're never more than 20 minutes away from the latest traffic through the day.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Can I just say, by the way, that I never went on the bobs. And no, I don't really know what they were. I know it was a rather exciting merry-go-round on the fair. Oh, we saw the mangy lions and the bear in the pit. And I think we went on some of the rides, but I've no recollection of going on the bobs. I also went to the Moscow State Circus at Bellevue. How tiny. Stuart in Newell Green, are you?
Hi, Alan. Now, listening to you talking about voting.
Yeah.
Are you aware, or is it still the case, that there has to be a Bible in the polling station?
I'm not aware of such a thing, and I didn't know that it had ever been the case, so I can't say whether it still is or still...
My friend used to work for the city engineers, and he did I don't know what to call them, let's say tellers, for want of a better word. And he asked the question, and panic, all the hell let loose. Now, in a school, where the polling station was, you would think there was a Bible, but no, they sent a Bible from the town hall to the polling booth here in Wythenshawe.
I wonder why there would be need of a Bible.
I don't know, Alan. I can't fathom it myself. I'm an atheist.
Well, whether one is an atheist or not, one can intellectualise the thought. I mean, why would there be... What would be the purpose of the Bible? Nobody's there able to take an oath, because in order to take an oath you need a notary public there, and there's no requirement for a notary public.
But he's often related that story. He's often told that story. Another thing, Alan, the case of the driver that got fined for using a bus lane because he got out of the way of an emergency vehicle, i.e. an ambulance.
Yeah, he's not been fined yet, but go on.
Well, why didn't the ambulance driver use the bus lane?
I've no idea.
You go down, let's say, for instance, Ashton New Road, you go down there and you very rarely see a bus, or more than 2 buses. They're marked for taxis and they're marked for buses. Now, mark them for emergency vehicles.
Yes, on the face of it, but when you're driving along in your car and you hear the siren and then you see the flashing blue lights in your mirror, your instinct is to get out of the way and then stop.
I've come down Princess Park when it's been like the part in the Red Sea when there's 5 blues and 2s are going. Cars just get out of the way.
Well, yes, they do.
I'm not being critical of the ambulance driver.
No, you're not. You're not being critical of anyone. You're merely asking a perfectly sensible question. But if the individual, there you are, you're in your motor car.
Yeah.
There's traffic all around you. There's an empty lane on your left. Doesn't matter for our purposes what that empty lane is for. If the ambulance is already in the right-hand lane, you might think, well, it's going to take an awful lot of ingenuity and teamwork out the drivers to make a space for him to get to the left and then use the bus lane, whereas if we all shove over to the left, he can carry on in a straight line. But your natural instinct, well, mine,
get out of the way,
is to get out of the way. That means to move out of the course he is embarked upon. Whether he's on the right one or not doesn't matter. You get out the way on the presumption that he's right. So I don't think the driver's done much wrong, to be honest.
No. Now, you're talking about Booth Hall. Can I relate a
I wasn't, but go on.
But I was in Booth Hall Hospital, and the morning after my operation, my uncle came from Beswick, picked my dad and my brother up, and my brother filmed the journey from Wythenshawe right to the gates of Booth Hall, then switched the camera off.
Yeah.
The following week, he took my eldest niece to Bellevue. Now, at Booth Hall, they had two ponies, Jack and Jill.
Who presumably from time to time went up the hill.
Yeah, well...
but only for a pail of water. I'm sorry, go on.
Well, I could tell which one was Jack. All right.
If it's having a wee, there's about 12 and a half inches of reason for telling, but go on.
But he switched the camera off, and the following week he took my niece to Bellevue and filmed the lions and the tigers and the elephant or whatever, and got the film processed, put the film on, showed my mum. There's the journey to Booth Hall. There's the car turning into the drive at Booth Hall. All of a sudden, there are lions and tigers. My mum said, I knew they got ponies at Booth Hall, but I didn't know they got lions and tigers. That's gospel truth.
If you've still got that, I think you should send it off to one of them telly programmes presented by somebody you've never heard of. Yeah.
I knew they got ponies, but I didn't know they got lions and tigers.
Fabulous. Good on you. Cheers, Stuart.
Cheers, Alan.
Ta-ra now. 0161 228 2255. Just for the record, the bus lane driver, the guy who moved out of the way in order to allow an ambulance to pass, but in moving out of the way, moved into a bus lane, he was sent a fine, is how we describe it. It's a silly phrase, but we know what it means. He was sent a fine or a requirement to pay a fine for breaching that lane. As I understand it, he's not yet offered his defence against that offence, so we don't know whether he will end up paying a fine or not. De facto, it's fairly straightforward. The operator sees it. In fact, it might even be a computer. The computer says, motor car in bus lane, send off letter demanding money. Letter was sent off, bloke gets it, goes barmy, tells everybody and anyone that's prepared to listen. I suspect and hope when he writes in and says, no, you can't do it, we're not on, if that's what happens, then the authorities should say, obviously on this occasion we'll waive it, but there's no guarantees, are there? NH tells us that prescriptions are not free in Scotland. NHS, sorry, I don't know where that came from. Accommodation in EHPs is not free. It's an additional non-medical care, which is free. Well, we have that bit in the UK. Sorry, Scotland's in the UK, but in the England bit of the UK. 01612282255. The Bellevue Bobs, Alan, you missed the ride of your life. The scenic railway was another worth a note, and that's Norman. The Bellevue Bobs were apparently the ride of my life. Make of that what you will. Dave in Rochdale. Hiya, Dave.
Hi. Just a note on that before I start on what I wanted to say about the Bobs.
Oh, go on.
The railway was quite horrendous. The bobs were, well, you had to check your underpants when you'd finished.
Really?
Oh, it was horrendous, the bobs. It was a cracker, it was. Real good. The Scenic Railway really shook you apart, but that one, oh, no wonder they closed it down.
Oh, so the Scenic Railway wasn't actually a railway with views?
Oh, it was just like the normal bobs thing, but it was a smaller version.
Oh, right. Oh, well, there you go. I had this vision of driving through the countryside of East Manchester.
No, it was two, like they do at Blackpool. But
Indeed. I'm not a great fan of rides, I must admit. I find them utterly boring.
It shook you to death. It was brilliant.
How very
anyway,
bizarre. Go on.
What I came on for was talking about election fraud and what have you. It's not actually election fraud, but many, many years ago, my great-grandfather was town clerk of Haywood. And on the election night, they'd done all the votes and they were tipping out all the boxes onto the tables. And him and his son was sat there because he was part of the town hall as well. And out of these particular ballot boxes that came from the part of the area where he lived, came the ballot papers and loads of shredded newspaper, like strips of newspaper that looked like ballot papers.
Right.
And the red faces started to, what's going on? And the thing what happened was that they'd had the ballot boxes in his house, ready to go to the polling station in the morning. But the two little girls, which one was my mother and my auntie, were about 6 and 7 at the time. And my mother died last year at age 92. You can tell how long ago it was.
So that they were practicing.
Ripping up the papers, sticking it in the ballot box, unknown to a grandfather. And the red faces that went around the town hall afterwards,
Fabulous.
Quite funny about
Fabulous. Well, the boxes, of course, the ballot boxes are sealed.
Yeah.
At usually the town hall, but certainly at the premises of the returning officer in Manchester. That is, of course, Sir Howard Bernstein, Chief of the Council. So they're sealed in that office. They're then delivered to the polling station. And in some cases, because some of the boxes have all the paraphernalia of the election, the books of polling certificates, the stamp that they have to use, all that is put in a box and it's sealed. And then when that particular box arrives at the polling station, what should happen is the seals are broken, it is opened, all the gubbins is taken out, and that way it can't have been interfered with, it's closed again and resealed with a new seal. That's what should happen. We'll get to what did happen in St Clair's Primary School in Blakely on the 1st of May, later when I read the extract from Sir Howard's letter. You might want to stay tuned for that.
Yes, I will do.
All right, well, stick around, Dave. Good on you, mate. Cheers. Jeff in Collyhurst. Hiya, Jeff.
Hi, Alan. Are you still on that subject of that bus lane use?
Yes.
I'm dismayed that the council don't fine drivers for not using the bus lane when you're supposed to use it. I've gone up Cheetham Road, that particular stretch where that driver got done. I use that that road. And Saturday and Sunday, when the bus lane does not apply, I've seen drivers just clinging into the outside lane and they've got a backlog of traffic all the way up Cheetham Road. And bus lane's free. Nobody is in it. Now, as far as I look at it, is the drivers are driving without due care and attention, and they should be fined for not using that bus lane by the council.
It's an interesting one. There is no general obligation to use the bit of the road, except on a motorway. There's no general obligation to use the bit of the road that is on the left. So I don't know what the offence would be in not using the lane. I understand what you're saying about people, they don't understand them.
No. I'd put it down to driving without due care and attention, because when you're driving a car, you're supposed to take notice of all the signs that are there, aren't you?
Yes.
Right. Well, if you can't read that board and it says to them that it's Monday to Friday, which is a bus lane, it doesn't mention anything about Saturday and Sunday. Nothing at all.
As I say, I agree. There is always an explanatory... there is always meant to be. Sometimes they're vandalised, but there's always an explanatory sign saying when the bus lane applies and when it does not, or when the regulations creating the bus lane apply and when they do not. And you're right, drivers are... They're concerned. They think, oh, blimey, that's a bus lane, I'm not going in it. And they don't take the trouble to find out and to drive accordingly. The problem is, I don't know what offence you would charge him with. You can't charge him with driving without due care and attention, because his answer would be, my answer in that position would be, of course I read it. But I chose to drive against the white line, as is my right. Now, I don't know how you stop that.
No.
Because he's not driving without due care and attention. Driving without due care and attention, you need some evidence that he didn't see it. He didn't.
It's the same thing as driving along the motorway, right? You know what?
No, it's not the same thing as driving along the motorway, because the motorway regulations are clear. You must drive on the nearest, the lane nearest to the left, that it's safe for you to do so. That's the regulation. That's not the regulation on the open road.
No, I wasn't going down to the road markings. I was going about the speed limit. The speed limit. I mean, everybody knows it's 70 mile an hour, but they still go belting along at 100, don't they?
And they're committing an offence. And if they are brought to a court, or if they're spotted doing that, and they concede that that's the speed they were doing, in other words, if it's agreed that's the speed they were doing, they're guilty of an offence.
Yeah,
but they're not guilty of an offence to drive against the white line when you could drive further over to the left is not an offence.
Yeah,
on the open road.
I just wish that they would say a bit more.
Well, so do I. But don't you feel smug when you're driving along and you think, well, I understand it all?
But see, the thing is, if I drive along that bus lane on a designated time when I'm allowed to use it,
yes,
the other drivers in the outside line take me for a prat, because you think, look at that idiot, he's going to get done.
Well, yes, they do take you for a prat because you're breaking the law.
No, during the time that you're allowed to use it.
Oh, I'm sorry, during the time you're allowed to use it, yeah, they look at you as if you're barmy, but they're wrong.
You know. All right, Alan, that's all right.
Have a good one, Jeff. Cheers, mate. Another point, says David, another point in the Glasgow by-election could have been the record price of oil. Every Scotsman I've spoken to always refers to Scotland's oil rather than North Sea oil, and no doubt the Scots Nats would have been sure to mention it on the doorsteps. They may well have done, and why not? We purloined their oil, and now, of course, they're purloining every penny we've got. Keith says, Alan, I sent an email a bit late the other day. The first week you were off. Where are we? Yeah, oh, God, I can't make it. You can't write in capitals. Please don't write in capitals. Anyway, I'm back. So the first week I were off is an irrelevance. Don't write in capitals. It makes it sound angry. Back with the SNP, Teddy Moston, always one for a view. This is ridiculous. The SNP being the Scottish National Party. This is ridiculous, he says. We're becoming an untied kingdom. Very good. The SNP is robbing the rest of the country blind. Part of the country, no part of the country should have preference over any other part. Scotland is not a country, neither is England or Wales. A few nutcases like Alex Salmon think that they are, but they're not. In my opinion, Alex Salmon is a traitor. He hates his own country, the United Kingdom. Just because 300 years ago there was more than one state on the British Isles doesn't mean that should be the case now. I don't even agree with Irish independence. If I were in power, that parasite state would be eliminated. They entirely depend on Britain for food and fuel. There aren't many Germans campaigning for Prussian independence. So-called Scottish nationalism is not nationalism because Scotland was never a nation. It was a state. A nation is the people. If I were in power, Marxist organisations like the SNP would be disbanded and banned from reforming. This is the disease of Bolshevism at work. Teddy Moston, thank you very much indeed. But you really ought to come down off the fence from time to time. 0161228 2255. If you've something to say, you can say it via email. Don't write in capitals. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And, of course, you can text on 07786 206 951. Bill in Wigan will talk to you after the sport and the headlines and all that other gubbins. But speaking of Scotland and Scottish elections and all the rest of it, the Speaker of the House of Commons, who represents a Glasgow constituency and is much in the news, is in the news again today. Apparently, he's had his portrait done. It comes with the territory. He's had his portrait done, and he's got back in touch with the artist and said, "You've made me nose too big." There's so many gags available, like, well, it's not as big as you think it is, but it looks bigger. when it's in the trough. It's 20 to 1 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines, Faye Rusco.
A man's been charged with manslaughter after the death of a 63-year-old man in Oldham. Teenagers are being warned not to tamper with fire hydrants after a number were set off in Greater Manchester in the hot weather. It led to hundreds of homes in Salford and North Manchester losing water pressure. And the former pop star from Warrington, Kerry Katona, has today accepted substantial libel damages from the Sunday Mirror after they wrongly claimed she was a prostitute before she was famous. Manchester's weather fine and hot, but there is the chance of thunderstorms later, highs of 27 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
We'll do watch out for delays. If you're travelling around London Road at the moment, the northbound, it's closed that stretch for sewer work still between Whitworth Street and Ducey Street. Usually causes traffic to slow down a bit. Closed heading into town except for buses, so there is a diversion signed for you. In Royton, Shaw Road still closed off as well for resurfacing work between Oldham Road and Edge Lane Street, ongoing until the end of next month. Winnick Road still restricted in Warrington as well. Roadworks continue there at Owen Street. Again, you will see a diversion sign for you, so you might want to allow yourself some extra time for your journey. And no change in Bolton either. Bridgman Place still closed off after that fire last week, so the stretch between Bradshaw Gate and Carlton Street still closed off. Traffic is coping well. All quiet on the motorways as well. No accidents or incidents, thankfully. If you know otherwise, though, if you want to update us, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Maria Jackson.
BBC Radio Manchester, Sports with Will Perry.
Good afternoon. Well, we'll start with some Rugby League news, and the Rugby Football League says it isn't concerned about the new stadium for Salford City Reds, despite the developers going into administration, and the club insists the stadium will be built on time. Mark Elliott has more details.
The 22,000 capacity stadium by the M60 at Barton was being planned by Red City Developments at a cost of £35 million. It was part of a regeneration project, including a hotel and shopping unit. But just days after Salford was awarded a 3-year Super League franchise, the development firm was placed into administration. Despite that, both the club and the RFL say they're satisfied the project will go ahead as planned, saying the situation is a technicality. The stadium's due to be completed by 2010.
St Helens have announced that they've appointed Kieran Purtill as assistant to new head coach Mick Potter for next season. It will be a return to Knowsley Road for Purtill, who's currently in caretaker charge at Huddersfield Giants, and he says he had no hesitation in accepting Saints' offer.
When a club like St Helens comes in, it's equivalent to Manchester United coming for you, and it don't take a lot of persuading to go there. I've got a coaching plan from my own career. I thought at this stage in my career it was a bit too soon to be a head coach. The key is being patient. I've got plenty of time ahead of me, and I need to gain some more experience and learning, and I think that's the key to it.
Well, an internet campaign's been set up to support Trafford 400-metre hurdler Rick Yates, who's been left out of the British Olympic squad. He won the Olympic trials and achieved the Olympic B standard, which means he could have been picked at this weekend's London Grand Prix event at Crystal Palace. He ran a lifetime best and achieved not only an A standard for Beijing, but put him 8th on the British all-time list for the event. But UK Athletics say they still won't take him. Straight after the race, Yates said he wasn't surprised because he doesn't train with one of the UK Athletics training groups.
Our group has had like that in the past from UK Athletics, so it wasn't really anything new to me because I trained with Andrew Steele, and it's taken him a while to break through, even though he's been running the times for a while, so it was nothing I didn't expect, but there's nothing I can do about it. My coach just told me to let my legs do the talking, and I think I did that today.
He sounds knackered there. Some football news for you. Liverpool are expected to complete the £18 million signing of Robbie Keane within the next 24 hours. It's understood that the Tottenham striker has undergone a medical at Anfield today. On the other side of Liverpool, Everton striker Andy Johnson is undergoing a medical at Fulham ahead of a planned £12 million deal. Aston Villa say Wilfred Boomer has undergone successful surgery on his horrific dislocated ankle. The defender's expected to be out for between 4 to 6 months. Manager Martin O'Neill says Freddie is in good spirits. Well, another Freddie, former Lancashire and England all-rounder Andrew Flintoff, could be paid £1 million if he plays in the Indian Premier League. That's the view of the chairman and commissioner of the IPL, Latit Modi. He told the BBC that Freddie would be top choice if available.
We have paid salaries of close to £750,000 to £800,000 to players who are participating in the Indian Premier League. So it all depends on the franchise. If he thinks that Kevin Peterson or Flintoff is worth that while, I'm sure he will go out and pay for it.
Well, meanwhile, former Lancashire and England captain Michael Atherton has criticised England's under-fire cricket selectors, saying Steve Harmison's recall to the Test squad sends a terrible message. Darren Pattinson's inclusion at Headingley raised eyebrows, but Atherton says the recall of Harmison for Wednesday's third Test at Edgbaston is as uninspiring as his recent record in international cricket and his attitude. And finally, in golf, the 20-year-old amateur Chris Wood has opted to follow in the footsteps of Justin Rose. Wood finished joint 5th at the Open 8 days ago and has this morning decided to turn professional.
So Salford are getting a 22,000-seater stadium, but the builder's gone into receivership or administration or something. But one way they could save money is by not buying 19,000 of the chairs.
You don't have to love rugby league to love Jack Dearden and Trevor Hunt.
We only wish they were here. I know, it sounds like a travel programme. What was she called on the travel programme? Judith Chalmers, who didn't wear any underwear when she was on
Jack, no!
Speaking of things like that, and did you read about Valerie Singleton? Now we know.
I don't want to know anymore.
Now we know why they called it Blue Peter.
Jack Dearden, Trevor Hunt.
Jack, seriously, do you think Hornets would have gotten away with the same ruling that Hull had?
I mean, I'll say it for Jack. The answer's quite simple.
I can speak for myself, thanks.
And all too often.
The Rugby League Hour with Jack Dearden and Trevor Hunt.
That's the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thursday evening from 7
at BBC Radio Manchester.
Not to be missed for rugby fans, and as you can imagine, or as you just had evidence, you don't have to be a rugby fan to enjoy it. I don't know the name on this, but no matter. Some months ago, Alan, you referred to someone who'd failed her driving test because she didn't use an out-of-hours bus lane when taking that test. I may well have done so, and one should fail one's driving test if one doesn't use an out-of-hours bus lane, because the driving test is an examination of your ability to comprehend all around you on the road and to implement it. That doesn't mean it's an offence not to use it. So, again, it's rather like if you drive the whole of your driving test at 26 miles per hour, there is a fair chance you'll fail your test because you'll fail for demonstrating your inability to cope with the road conditions, and so you're not fit yet to drive. It's a rarefied atmosphere, if you like. And Steve says, Alan, this is via text, Steve says it's inherently safer to pass on the offside. Yes, it is. But there's no suggestion that a person driving against the white line has someone behind him or her who wishes to overtake. In the event that there is somebody wishing to overtake, you are correct. The person should move out of the way and let them overtake, even if the person behind them is breaking the speed limit. So, again, your point is correct, but in the case of bus lanes use or not, irrelevant. It's getting on for 10 to 1. Bill in Wigan. Hiya, Bill. Hello, Bill. Oh, dear. Let's try Bill on there. You there, Bill? No Bill in Wigan. We'll try again, and we'll fail again. William in Bolton. Hiya.
Hello, Alan.
What have you got, mate?
Yeah, I want to talk about John Prescott and Jack Straw.
Okay.
Stifling dissent in the Labour Party.
Okay.
I've got a message for Jack Straw. Shut up and start listening to the British public. The British public are sick of having Britain, between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, they've turned Britain into a pigsty, and our public services have become a feeding trough for con men and thieves who are thieving off the British taxpayer. Our health service, our education service and our public transport are being ripped off by big business, and the public are sick of you. That's my message, Alan.
All right. And those are, views you're entitled to hold. I don't understand why you suggest that Prescott and Straw should shut up and try to stifle dissent in the Labour Party.
No, I'm saying that they are, at present, trying to stifle dissent within the Labour Party.
Yes.
That dissent is coming from the British public.
I'm not sure that it is. I think the dissent in the Labour Party is coming from yellow-bellied Labour MPs who think they're going to lose their gravy-train job at the next election and have to go out and do a day's work.
And that, yeah.
And if MPs think that the leader should be changed, and they mumble and grumble and whine about it, it's perfectly reasonable for the leaders of the party to tell them to shut up, isn't it?
Well, I suppose it is reasonable of them, but the point is that they are there not to represent the vested interest of a little clique, including George Howarth MP, at the top of the Labour Party. They are there to represent the British public. I am not, by the way, a member of any Labour of any party. I'm just a voter. And I together with a lot of ordinary Joe blogs who haven't got a bean to rub together, are being ripped off by con men who are hiving off our education services, for example, in the form of the academy system. Our health service was ripped off using using health service facilities to the tune of £4.5 billion at the last count by a private health service, while nurses cannot get jobs and while people are dying in hospital through lack of appropriate care. Alan, it has got to stop.
Well, OK, if you've got to stop, I'll let you stop. But I don't know. I mean, there are all sorts of questions that arise from that. One is, would it be better if another party was in power? Would it have been better if another party had been in power? I mean, you eventually, and I know this is an unfortunate reference, but you have to play with the cards that you are dealt.
Yeah. Well, I did start off, Alan, forgive me, I did start off by saying that the Labour Party, together with the Conservative Party, they continued what the Conservative Party started, and they have gone all along with it. That's what's happened. So we're talking about what we need is a revolution in this country, basically, where we either have a Labour Party which does not hide behind the title of Labour, which is a total and utter fraud. We need a Labour Party which believes in Labour. The nearest thing this party knows about Labour is the pain it causes to the British public.
OK, well, one last question. You say we need a Labour Party that believes in Labour and
socialism, let's
say.
Socialism.
We had a Labour Party that believed emphatically in socialism, and it lost every election it presented itself at. Now, if you think the Labour Party changed its spots again and dropped new and went back to being a socialist party, do you think that would be more attractive to the current electorate?
Well, maybe not, because as I have once admitted...
So you think they should...
Well, I'm willing to take a chance on it, let's say that.
You're willing to take a chance, but do you think it would be better for the nation if the Labour Party went back to its socialist roots, lost the election, and David Cameron's Conservatives won the election? Do you think that would be better for the working people of this nation, or less good for the working people of this nation, although the Labour Party would then have the pride?
I think that if the public stopped being gullible and greedy as taxpayers and opted for a rise in taxes, which would be more, as I've already said before, a more appropriate, a fairer system of taxes whereby the rich are taxed appropriately more and not the working man, the ordinary working man, I think that would be more favourable to the British public, and I think we as a nation would be better off as a caring and compassionate society.
All right, William in Bolton says we would be better off if we actually realise that there are other people out there and we cast our vote according to what can be done for the collective rather than what can be done for us and our wallets. A text tells me that the ambulance, in the case of the bus lane driver, the ambulance was coming towards the driver on the opposite side of the road. I didn't know that that was the case. Indeed, I rather thought it wasn't, but it changes nothing. Unless it's a sort of dual carriageway, and unless there's a barrier in the centre of the road, it makes no difference, frankly. I think the arguments that are made thus far still apply. Bill in Wigan, I think we've got you now. Hiya, Bill.
Hello, Alan.
Hello,
yes.
mate. What can we do for you?
Well, can I go back to the previous...
Anywhere you like.
Yes. About the disparity, the inequality between us English and the rest of the UK.
Go on.
I think, and people I speak to think, English people, of course, that it's high time that we demanded equality with the rest of the United Kingdom. This inequality, bearing in mind that we subsidise the other three buggers in any case, apart from being democratic as well, which we're supposed to be a democracy, why, in your opinion, have we put up with it for so long? It's in education, it's in elderly people's treatment, it's in
I'm not sure
prescriptions in Wales.
I'm not sure what you mean by demanding equality, and I'll explain why I'm slightly confused. Do you mean political equality? In other words, a parliament for the English where the English, by English I mean MPs elected by English constituencies, where English MPs discuss what happens in England, rather like the Scottish MPs discuss what happens in Scotland. To a lesser extent, the same is also the case in Wales and Northern Ireland. And therefore we will have different systems in operation and different rates of grants and all the rest of it in each of the four elements. Because at the moment, Scotland can vote for itself, but England cannot. So is that the equality do you want?
Partly, yes. Partly.
Or do you mean that the rates of taxation and benefit that pertain in all the parts of the United Kingdom should be the same?
Inequality in its entirety, yes, all across the board. We subsidise the other three, there's no question about that.
But that's rather like the argument that Ken Livingstone puts, and that is that London subsidises the whole of, if we're just dealing in England, the whole of England. More taxation is raised in London than anywhere else in the country. We're also in the position recently where parts of Greater Manchester have had assistance that other parts of the country have not had. That has always been the case. There is extreme poverty in parts of Greater Manchester, and those extreme poverty elements have been addressed. The great difficulty I have is understanding what you mean by equality. Do you mean equality in that every area gets the same amount of money per head of population, or do you mean every person gets the same amount of money, or do you mean you put the money where it's needed?
I know what you're getting at, Alan.
Well, I'm just asking questions. I'm trying to find out your view.
When I say across the board, I mean equality in everything, the treatment of everyone, the facilities available to everyone in the United Kingdom. I don't think that there should be, well, it's a Welsh Assembly and three other so-called governments.
So you think that we should not have devolved Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales?
That's true.
And so you think we should go back to a unified United Kingdom government, full stop?
We would all know where we stood. This inequality about education in Scotland, treatment of elderly people and so on, and yet it's not available in Carlisle, which is just, well, you know where that is, a few yards away, in fact. And same in Wales, adults of all ages get free prescriptions. Why? Why do I don't know, I'm too old to pay for prescriptions, but I think it's about £7 odd per item.
I have no idea what it is. I mean, it is a lot of money, I'll grant you.
Okay,
well, Bill...
People who I know find it a very, very great hardship.
All right, but there's no suggestion, there is no suggestion that if we devolve, if you like, is that revolve, if we reconstitute the United Kingdom as it was, I don't think prescriptions would be available across the board. It would just mean we'd be taking them off those who have them free for present. But universal, we should go back to a United Kingdom. The Scottish Parliament should not exist along with the assemblies for Northern Ireland and Wales. What do you say to that?
Have you got secrets from your partner? Is having secrets always a bad thing, or can they add some spice? Find out tonight from 10 with me, Sam Walker.
If you've something to say, I'd love to hear it via the usual processes. In about half an hour's time, I'm going to be reading you an explanation of why and how election boxes were tampered with in Manchester.
95.1 FM.
DAB Digital Radio.
And the World Wide Web.
This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, Joey Barton's out of jail and gets a second chance, and a man's charged with manslaughter in Oldham.
And the developers of Salford City Red's new stadium go into administration.
Well, this afternoon we've got sunny spells and the chance of a thundery shower. Very warm with top temperatures of 27 Celsius.
And traffic's looking heavy at the moment in Stockport on Buxton Road, the A6 between Regent Road and Grosvenor Street near to the Stockport College.
Good afternoon, I'm Faye Rusco. The Newcastle footballer Joey Barton's been released from prison in Manchester. The former Manchester City player served 74 days of a 6-month sentence for assault. The chief executive of the Professional Footballers Association, Gordon Taylor, says he welcomes the decision by Kevin Keegan to give Barton a second chance.
To some extent, I'm glad that he still has faith in him. Joey's been running out of last chances. May have been a time when Newcastle would have said, we can't stand for this, and move him on. Hopefully Kevin thinks he can work his oracle with Joey, and Joey will get his life back on track, both as a human being and as a footballer.
A man's in hospital with 40% burns after he was locked in a van and set alight in Stockport. He had petrol poured on him on Beechwood Drive in Marple before he was locked inside and the van was set on fire. He's now at the specialist burns unit at Wythenshawe. His injuries are not life-threatening. Teenagers are being warned not to tamper with fire hydrants after a number were set off in Greater Manchester. It led to hundreds of homes in Salford and North Manchester losing water pressure at the weekend. Nick Hume from United Utilities says the hot weather is no excuse, and if there is a fire, it's extremely dangerous.
Setting off these hydrants can cut off water supply to people's homes, which causes a huge amount of inconvenience to the public and, of course, to our engineers as well. But worse still, tampering with hydrants can actually put lives at risk. It can mean that firefighters don't have enough water pressure to tackle blazes when they turn up at incidents.
A man's in hospital after being stabbed in the thigh in East Manchester. It happened on Saturday night on Darras Road in Gorton. He's now stable. An 18-year-old man and a 44-year-old man have been arrested and bailed until October. Now, despite the credit crunch, there's a prediction house prices will rise by 25% in the next 5 years. The National Housing Federation expects prices to fall by a further 2% next year before increasing again. The Federation's chief executive, David Orr, says it's a question of supply and demand.
There are not enough houses in the market to be able to cope with the level of need that we have. And although the credit crunch has made mortgages very difficult to come by, if that begins to loosen off, we anticipate that level of unmet demand will have the effect of beginning to put prices back up again.
Pupils in Greater Manchester are to be given money to encourage them to apply to the country's top universities. 1,500 of them will be offered £400 as part of the City Challenge scheme. It'll go on after-school clubs, free school meals and university guidance and mentoring. And the former pop star from Warrington, Kerry Katona, has today accepted substantial libel damages from the Sunday Mirror. They'd wrongly claimed she'd been a prostitute before becoming famous in Atomic Kitten, the size of the payouts not being disclosed.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Will Perry.
Well, the Rugby Football League say it isn't concerned about the new stadium for Salford City Reds, despite the developers going into administration. The 22,000 capacity stadium by the M60 at Barton was being planned by Red City Developments at a cost of £35 million. But just days after Salford were awarded a 3-year Super League franchise, the development firm was placed into administration. The RFL say the situation is a technicality. Liverpool are expected to complete the £18 million signing of Robbie Keane within the next 24 hours. It's understood that the Tottenham striker has undergone a medical at Anfield today. On the other side of Liverpool, Everton striker Andrew Johnson is undergoing a medical at Fulham ahead of a planned £12 million deal. In cricket, Andrew Flintoff could be paid £1 million if he plays in the Indian Premier League 2020 competition. The head of the IPL, Lalit Modi, says Flintoff would be a huge attraction and would attract a big salary if he was available. And finally, an internet campaign's been set up to support Trafford 400-metre hurdler Rick Yates, who's been left out of the British Olympic Olympic squad at this weekend's London Grand Prix event at Crystal Palace. He ran a lifetime best and achieved the A standard for Beijing, but UK Athletics say they still won't take him.
BBC Radio Manchester, satellite weather with Heather Stotts.
Well, this afternoon we are going to see some sunshine, but that sunshine is going to be hazy from time to time as the cloud starts to build. And that cloud could thicken up enough to bring us 1 or 2 showers. And those showers could be heavy and they could be thundery. Top temperatures today, well, it feels very warm and humid with a top temperature of 27 Celsius.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Usual number 0161228 2255. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and text number is 07786 206 951. Kev asks from St Helens, I'm rather confused, he says. What happens when someone from the Scottish National Party is elected? And does he just sit in the Scottish Parliament? Does he sit in the UK Parliament? Or does he sit in both and can vote on English matters? Well, it's like this. First of all, I don't think the SNP have any UK members of Parliament. I don't think they do. But that really isn't the question. The question is, there are 2 parliamentary elections that take place in Scotland. One is for the Scottish Parliament, and one is for the UK Parliament, the British Parliament. If a person is elected to the Scottish Parliament, they are entitled to sit in the Scottish Parliament, full stop. If they're elected to the British Parliament, they're entitled to sit in the British Parliament, full stop. If they stand for both and are elected to both, they are entitled to sit in each. So the likes of Gordon Brown and many others who have been elected to the UK Parliament by Scottish constituencies are entitled to sit in the British Parliament, and as such will vote on British matters and therefore on English matters. But they are not. Gordon Brown cannot sit in the Scottish Parliament. He would have to stand for a Scottish parliamentary election so to do. It is also the case that a person who stands for the Scottish Parliament and is duly elected to the Scottish Parliament does not gain the right to sit in the British Parliament and discuss British matters or English matters, because he's not elected to the British Parliament. If he then goes on to be elected, he can serve in both. He can be elected to both. You can be a member of both parliaments, but you have to be elected to each of them. Kev, I hope that explains it. If not, I'm kind of snookered, really. I think, says a texter, I think the UK should stay as it is, but I think we should only allow English MPs into the English Parliament. Well, there is no English Parliament, so it would require the creation of an English Parliament. And then what would we do with the UK Parliament? I don't know. Neil in Altrincham. Hiya, Neil.
Hi, Alan. How are you?
Not bad. What have you got?
I was just thinking when before I was listening to you about, the bus lines and that.
Yeah.
I understood there was something, I don't know, it could be in the highway code, that you kept to the left, apart from overtaking or turning right. I may be wrong on that, but that's what I understood. You kept to the left of the road apart from overtaking or turning right.
Well, you're sort of correct, but the highway code of itself is not a legal document. To breach the highway code is not to breach the law, although there are some times when breaching the highway code will coincidentally also be a breach of the law, such as speed limits.
Understand that.
So that's that. Now, it is advised that you drive nearer to the left than the right, but it is not a requirement. If, of course, there is more than one lane, then there is a sort of requirement. But again, unless it's a motorway, that requirement is not supported by law. So I am entitled, in a wide road, I am entitled to drive against the central white line, if I wish. However, if somebody is behind me and travelling faster than me, I ought to get out of their way to allow them to pass.
What happens... Sorry.
Go on, no, carry on with your question.
What happens if there's, like, when it's not a motorway, but there's more than one lane on a normal A road, whether it be a dual carriageway or a single carriageway, and there's more than one lane going in each direction?
Well, again, if it's a dual carriageway, there is a general understanding that you're supposed to drive in the near side lane, but I'm not aware of any legislation that makes it a legal requirement.
Ah. So there is, well, it's probably more than one dual carriageway or single carriageway near us where there's 4 lanes, 2 lanes going each way. And a neighbour of mine used to drive for the post office from Altrincham to, I forget where it is now, somewhere down the M6, and coming back along the, it's part dual carriageway, part single carriageway, where the people would get in the outer lane to turn right about a mile before the turning right.
Yes, I've
and
witnessed.
he had to sit in his van for that mile and a half behind them, waiting to get past. And they wouldn't sort of give way.
But you see, the issue there isn't what lane they are in. The issue is that they are impeding the driver behind them.
Yeah.
So if there's any offence committed, and I'm not altogether sure that one has been, but if there is any offence committed, it is the impeding of the driver behind them.
Yeah.
So, honestly, the road traffic regulations are very airy-fairy in many cases because they've not been specifically written. The road traffic regulations relating to motorways, because somebody sat down and said, oh, look, we've got this new kind of road, we'd better make some rules for it. And they made rules and they passed them as laws. So they apply. But elsewhere, it's not necessarily, and remember that, it's not necessarily an offence to be on the right-hand side of the carriageway rather than the left. Now, by that, I mean up to the white line. But it's not necessarily the case that if you breach the white line for no real reason, you're breaking the law. You probably are, but it's not necessarily the case. Because, again, if it's a double white line, if it's an unbroken white line, yes. But if it's a broken one, you are entitled to breach it. Usually, that entitlement comes whilst overtaking.
Yes.
But the traffic law looks precise when you first see it, but isn't when you start defending cases against it, as a certain lawyer of this parish will tell you.
Talking about unbroken white lines, so you get people parking, and the regulation is that if there is a continuous white line, no matter which side of the road it is, because there can be a broken white line on your side and a continuous one on the opposite side.
It is the broken one that applies to you.
Yeah, but when you... I'm talking about parking now. You're not allowed to park when there is a continuous white line.
That is
in the
correct.
middle of no matter what side of the road it's on, but you still get people
Well, people break the rules.
Yeah.
That we know.
Yeah, motorways, people hanging in the middle lane or outside lane of a motorway.
Breaking the rules, absolutely so.
Nothing in the inner lanes. Yes.
All right.
Okay, thanks for the chat, Alan.
No pleasure.
Cheers.
Always a pleasure. 0161 228 2255. Nora in Chester. Hiya, Nora.
Hi, Alan. Alan, when you hear people, especially at these by-elections, saying, I've always voted Labour, but I voted Conservative this time, it shows you how politically ignorant, and I'm not blaming the people, because all the papers in this country, the general papers, are owned by millionaires. They're not going to educate the working class to take their wealth and power away. So apart from the right-wing politics, they fill it with sex, all about the royal family, the betting shops, the betting game, and, all the rubbish and everything. That's to keep us ignorant. Now, the thing is, as you probably well know, when we got the first Labour government, Ramsay MacDonald, they didn't have a large majority. But Ramsay MacDonald and the Labour movement never ever got over the shock that he sold us out and formed a national government with the Conservatives in all the poverty and everything. And the change we got, and the only Labour government that carried out socialist policies, was 1945. And the reason for that was, whereas the working class lived in the little narrow religious environments, fighting each other, racism and everything that went with it, when they were called up for the forces, they found out that the other side were only working class people like themselves struggling through life. And there was a lot of, they never mentioned this in documentaries, there was a lot of political discussion, like they used to set up mock parliament and all that, to educate the young and the older men that have been brainwashed, by everything. And them men were educated to know what caused the mass poverty, unemployment, bug-ridden slums, no help, and the rest of it. Anyway, when they come out, they were politically educated enough that we got a landslide victory. And yet the right wing of the Labour Party, and I heard the other day them talking about, I think it was your programme, about Herbert Morrison.
Yeah.
And he's Mandelson's grandfather, which, we knew, like a lot of us knew very well. And he was very right-wing and Attlee. And they didn't really want a welfare state. And it was the left-wing, and especially the MPs from mining areas, etc., who knew how vital a health service was with all the suffering in the mine.
Well, OK, you're right on with the history. But to say that those who vote in a way that you wouldn't want them to are not knowledgeable about politics is, frankly, A, offensive to some, I'm not bothered, but offensive to some, and B, more importantly, probably wrong, because there are people who look at the history and say that Labour had a fine history, but has an awful present, and indeed is no more socialist than Margaret Thatcher. Now, if that is the case, or if that is what an individual believes, you might as well, goes the thought, if you're going to have a Conservative government, you might as well have one that's good at it, rather than one that's not really very good at it, because they keep having to pretend that they're not one.
Well, Alan, to start with, I wouldn't be derogative about the people who are politically ignorant. Because
well, no, I'm not suggesting that you are derogatory.
No,
let me just put the point back to you.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that you are being derogatory about those who are ignorant. I think you might be being derogatory about those who are not ignorant, but you're defining them as such. Those who vote according to their beliefs of how the parties are today, rather than how the parties were in 1945.
But, right, Alan, you know very well that the Tory parties, conservative means to conserve a way of life. You wouldn't want to conserve a poverty-stricken life. And the Conservatives are solely in power to look after big business, the aristocracy, and keep them safe for the rich.
But that is not exactly the case. Yes, that would have been the case back in 1945 and for a long time since. And even Margaret Thatcher could very easily be categorised, caricaturised, if you like, in that way. But to suggest that there is much difference between the policies of the current Conservative Party and the current Labour Party is frankly bizarre.
Yes, but Alan...
But you don't get to vote. When I go to the election next time, I won't get to vote for the parties of 1945, not even for the parties of 1995, nor yet for the parties of 2005.
Yes,
I'll get to vote for the parties as they are today.
Yes, but Alan, there's nobody knows better than the likes of you and me that the Labour Party is not Labour, because even before they got into power, we tried to warn people, this new Labour is new Tory. And people never learn. And there was a clip of them.
But perhaps they do learn. I sometimes think, Nora, that people get the politics and politicians and parties that they want, rather than getting educated, if you like, into the ways of history.
Well, I've no time for these and they keep saying, stick with it, we'll change it, and they never change it. But the thing is, the last general election, I was so angry the way they keep letting us down over and over again. I've worked on every election since 1945, before I was even old enough to vote, when Harold Wilson was 29 years of age. He stood under the lamp outside our house, trying to get the lads who were about to be demobbed and all that. But the thing is, the last election, enough was enough when all the scandal and they're only careerists and opportunists. I moved over to Chester and there was an election, and I went in and there was Conservative, Liberal, which are Conservative, prop up the system. The Labour, right-wing, Conservative, you'd call them, UK Party and Democratic Party. There wasn't even any green on. I just drew two lines across and said, no choice, all Tories.
All right, good on you, Nora. No choice, all Tories. Whether that helps or hinders in the fortunes of the nation is for you to decide. We're going to talk to Jim in Bolton soon. And it's 22 minutes past 1 o'clock, in fact. And with the news headlines, Faye Rusko.
A man's been stabbed to death this morning in South Manchester. He was found at a house on Moldeth Road West in Withington. A 32-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murder. A teenager's had to have more than 50 staples in his head after a savage bottle attack in Oldham Town Centre. And the Newcastle footballer Joey Barton's been released from prison. His manager Kevin Keegan has agreed to give him a second chance. Manchester's weather fine and hot, but there is the chance of thunderstorms later, highs of 27 Celsius.
Wasn't the second chance about 5 chances ago?
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Buxton Reason, Buxton Road in Stockport's looking very heavy indeed at the moment, the A6, between Regent Road and Grosvenor Street, just near to the Stockport College. In fact, traffic heading in from Hazel Grove looking very, very slow indeed. Doesn't seem to be anything untoward there, no accidents or incidents, just the sheer weight of traffic using that stretch this afternoon. No change in Bolton either. Bridgman Place still closed off because of that fire last week between Bradshaw Gate and Carlton Street. Traffic still coping well. Demolition work still continues on that road, so no word as yet of when the road will actually reopen. All quiet on the motorways, though. Good news there. No accidents or incidents, no slow spots to contend with on the M60 or on the M602 coming in or out of the city centre. Anything new spot though, and if you want to update us, call us on 01612 244 4951. I'm Maria Jackson.
With more updates than the other guys.
2020 traffic.
BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. It's getting on for 25 past 1. 0161228 2255. Jim in Bolton. Hiya, Jim.
Hello, good afternoon, Alan.
Good afternoon, sir.
Just a quick one on this bus lane thing.
Yes.
If everybody's driving on the outside lane, as it were, outside the bus lane, and somebody decides to drive up the inside and overtake them all, would he not get in trouble for undertaking?
He could very easily get in trouble for undertaking.
Right, so there's no get out of that, really, is there? So if you do the right thing, what I'm saying, if you do the right thing and drive on the inside, and the traffic on the outside is either stationary or going slower than you are, you're going to get booked.
Well, no,
No incentive to use the inside lane, is there?
One is... Well, yes, there is. Just common decency is one of the incentives.
Come on, Alan, that doesn't work these days. You should know that.
Well, you asked what the incentive was. That's the common decency incentive.
Right.
And yes, if you are in the outside lane and you are impeding other drivers being in the outside lane or to the right-hand side of the lane that you are in, and you are impeding other drivers, you may well be guilty of an offence. You may well be guilty of driving without due care, and there are certain circumstances when other offences could pertain, if that is what you're doing. However, when there are no other vehicles behind you, or no vehicles behind you, if you drive on the right hand rather than the left hand side of the carriageway, other than on a motorway, you're not usually guilty of any offence.
Right.
Now, if it is a bus lane, and the bus lane is no longer active as a bus lane, or is not at that moment active of a bus lane, and somebody chooses to use that lane and pass you on the inside because you're impeding them, they do not negate their offence simply because you're committing one.
Right. Okay,
So in other words, imagine this. You're in a 3-lane motorway, you're on the M6, and the traffic is travelling along at 65 miles per hour. You're in the outside lane at 70 miles per hour. And a car comes behind you and arrives at you so quickly he's clearly doing 100. Yeah?
Yep.
If you decide, OK, I'll go at 100 because I can't pull over to the left because there's no room, and I'm impeding this guy, so I'll do 100, would you have a defence?
No.
No. Why? Because you're not allowed to break the law simply because somebody else is breaking it.
So basically, the signs that are put up for these bus lanes should, theoretically, or it would make common sense, to indicate to the people that they can. I mean, I know they do by the times, but would it not be worth putting a little bit at the bottom saying something like, use the inside lane between the hours of whatever?
No, because there are those that would take that as a direct instruction, and that might be contrary to safety.
So it's just basically that people are stupid.
Well, no. We don't want to have to read an essay as we drive along. So we already ought to know the correct way to drive. And if there are places where that correct way is slightly different, slightly different, then we have a sign to that effect. So where you might think it would be perfectly safe to drive along this road at 50 miles per hour, so you drive at 50 miles per hour. However, if the authorities think it would be unwise to drive at 50 miles an hour, they put up a big circle on a stick with a number in it. So you presume that the people know the way to drive, and where there are specific reasons why their driving should not be normal, but different, you tell them. In other words, at certain times of the day, don't use this lane. The implication of that is that the remainder of the day you can.
Yep, obviously.
So we don't want a whole essay on there, a huge photocopy of the highway code on every road sign giving you all the different options. So we'd never get anywhere.
So like I said a couple of minutes ago, it's just basically people are stupid, unfortunately.
Don't
answer that.
Well, it's difficult to argue against it in certain circumstances.
Yeah. A very, very quick one on this politics bit. Party politics doesn't work, has never worked, will never work.
What would you have in its stead?
I don't know. I'm not clever enough to know.
That's the problem, isn't it?
I think the nearest thing to what I think is a good system is like the Americans have as a president. But whether that could work in England is United Kingdom.
A system that allowed a rich Texan to steal the election is not something that I think is one that we want to adopt.
Well, it's not necessarily a rich Texan. I mean, we had a peanut grower, we've had an ex-car salesman.
Well, I don't know whether they stole it, but certainly in the case of George W. Bush, the election was stolen.
Well, again, people have a free vote.
They do have a free vote, but if
So they
a bunch of lying gangsters control that free vote, then their freedom is somewhat curtailed. The number of people who were struck off the register, the number of people whose votes were, should we say, damaged, inexplicably.
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
the system works, but sometimes the bastards that run it don't.
Yeah, corruption takes over, in other words.
I think it was Churchill, I might be wrong, but somebody once said the parliamentary system of election is an abomination, it is disgraceful, it is bad, bad, bad.
He was absolutely right. I mean, yes?
There isn't a better one anywhere else.
No, the last guy who had the right idea but went about it the wrong way unfortunately got caught and they burned him. Guy Fawkes.
A fine
there we
fellow.
go.
Have a good day.
That's a whole other story.
0161 228 2255. Frank in Sale. Hiya, Frank.
Hi, Alan.
What have you got?
Hey, first of all, if you want to win an election in America, you've got to have a brother called Jeb.
It may help.
You're in then, Alan. That's 90% of the vote. Back to the ambulance driver.
Yeah, go on.
The driver that...
the bus lane driver,
ticket,
yeah.
He called the council to question it and was told that he had to pay the fine.
Yeah.
But when the MEN contacted the council, they said they were going to withdraw the fine. Saturday's News, this. And they say that any other motorist fined for trying to let the ambulance pass should contact 954...
Don't give me a phone number.
It's Manchester Council.
Don't give me a phone number anyway.
Oh, right. Well,
You'll tell me it's Manchester Council. I'll believe you it's Manchester Council, and some poor old lady in Blakely will know it's not because she's just got 300 calls. So I'm not going to let you give me a phone number.
This is.
I'm not going to let you give me a phone number.
Well, the other one then. This is it's an email. It's buslanes@manchester.gov.uk.
That we'll have. All right.
They can send the thing there, and they'll get it cancelled. And they also say that the highway code states that drivers should not break the law to assist emergency vehicles.
That is what the highway code says.
Yeah.
That is definitely what the highway code says.
And another thing, the man that was given the ticket was actually trained to be a driving instructor.
He was indeed. He was indeed. But just because you know the highway code doesn't mean that you sometimes do things which are wiser than the rules.
No, I'd get out of the way as well.
So would I.
The thing is, Alan, it could be my turn one day, and some silly devil's holding the thing up, you know.
What the emergency service drivers say is all they want you to do is stop.
Yeah.
They'll do everything else. Leave it to them.
I was on a road that was a sheet of ice one morning going to work, and there was an ambulance coming down, and I moved over when there was a gap into the offside, into the near side lane that to go past, and the drivers at the back, they waited till I got back on the offside lane so I could carry on my journey.
That was kind of them.
Of course it was.
Well, my only ice story I've got is when I was a bus driver, and I'd gone up to Parbold Hill to collect, probably, it felt at the time, 65,000 children on a school run.
Yeah.
But it probably wasn't that many. And they were on my double-decker bus, and I was coming down Parbold Hill almost sideways at places, because you just couldn't help it. The weight of the bus just meant that it pushed you. And I suppose, really, we should have stopped and got everybody off, but there you are. It was that bad. But cars were overtaking me. And one of the cars that overtook me, as I got to the bottom of the hill, was wrapped around a lamppost. So I kind of enjoyed that. I shouldn't have done, but I did.
Alan, they haven't got a minute to stop, and it's stupid. I was going up the motorway to Lytham to see a cousin of mine, and it was teeming torrents. And I said to my wife, I'm going to pull over. I said, it's bad, this. I'm going, off this lane. I'm going to the near side lane, drop my speed. And there was a great big pink ball coming towards me. And in the middle of this pink ball, when it passed me, was a Porsche. And I was stood still compared to his speed. About 2 miles down the road, he was there on the hard shoulder. It conked out. So I presume he got water around his engine.
Who
but
cares?
The other thing about the emergency services, I go past Ashton Lane to get onto the main road, the A6. And the fire brigade come up from the station at the back there, and I dread being the first driver on that road if there's a fire engine at the back of me, because I don't think anybody on the A6 going from Manchester to Altrincham or Altrincham to Manchester will be very pleased about me nosing out to try and let a fire engine go past.
Good on you, Frank.
It's dangerous, that one.
It is
But
indeed.
I would always pull over if I could, Alan.
So would I, and I intend to continue doing so. Good on you, mate. Cheers. Frank in Sale, bringing us up to date on some of the bus lane story. Now, I promised you at about 1:30 that I would read an extract from a letter by Sir Howard Bernstein, the Chief Executive of Manchester City Council, but in this connection, more importantly, the returning officer for Manchester at the last election, and indeed the one before that, and I suspect the coming one, but we'll see. One of the candidates in the election in Blakely had, well, alleged that two irregularities had taken place. One, he alleged that a number of people who were entitled to vote were prohibited from doing so because their names were not on the list of electors, whereas they were on the electoral register. I'll deal with that one first. I'm not aware of how many there were. The gentleman concerned, the complainant, has been on this programme more than once and told us that there were a number. He put that in a letter of complaint, and indeed a letter of complaint about the regulation or the regulatory effect, for want of a better term, of the election. And this is what Sir Howard Bernstein said on that. I will first of all deal with your first point concerning the issuing of ballot papers. It is my understanding from the presiding officer's report that in one case only an elector's name could initially not be found on the register, and she was not issued with a ballot paper. However, I understand this situation was rectified 5 minutes later when the lady came back to the polling station with her husband, when her name was found on the register and she was issued with a ballot paper. So that's that. Now, I say to the complainant, if there are more people, if, for example, you turned up at St Clair's Primary School to cast your vote on the 1st of May and were turned away despite the fact that you're on the electoral register, then let me know. The number's 0161 228 2255, or you can write to me in the usual way, text, whatever. But let me know. The other one is the matter of broken seals, tampered with seals on a ballot box. Sir Howard Bernstein explains what should happen first, and this is what he says. Numbered ballot boxes are used to transport books of ballot papers, corresponding numbers, lists, registers, seals, signs and notices and other miscellaneous equipment to each polling station. The ballot boxes are filled with the above items at the town hall under the direction of the deputy returning officer. They are then sealed and stored in a secure location until they are collected by the presiding officer for each polling station on the morning of polling day. The allegation here is that those seals were tampered with. This is Sir Howard Bernstein's explanation from witness statements, if you like. This is it. It is my understanding from statements we have now received that the following sequence of events took place relating to the ballot box you refer to. The presiding officer, PO, collected the box and on arrival at the polling station managed to empty the box of all items without removing the seals that had been placed on the box for overnight storage. What should have happened is the overnight seals should have been removed, the contents emptied, and the box resealed just before 7 a.m. in the presence of any candidates or agents present, using the numbered and recorded seals issued to the presiding officer for that purpose. The PO then opened his polling station at 7 a.m. and I now realise that it was these seals which you or your agent recorded. Then, at some time between 8 and 9, the polling station inspector arrived at St Clair's to be informed by the PO that the ballot box was not tightly sealed. The PSI realised what the PO had done and telephoned the elections office for advice, and was advised to refit the top of the ballot box and reseal the ballot box correctly, and to explain to any candidates or agents present what was happening and why. Two questions. One, how does one get out of a ballot box, books, papers, all sorts of other things, out of a ballot box which is sealed without breaking that seal? I would have thought that was not possible, unless you were Paul Daniels. Now, if it is possible, as Sir Howard Bernstein of Manchester City Council seems to claim, if it is possible, then how is it not possible to take votes out of that box and discard them, damage them, change them, destroy them, or simply spoil them? The question I have to ask. Now, I know that Sir Howard Bernstein is a clever and an extremely honourable man. I also think he's been the best chief executive that Manchester City Council has ever had. I believe our electoral system is one of the best in the world. But it is that belief that makes me ask, how safe are our elections? If it is possible to open a ballot box without breaking the seals on that ballot box, then every single election in every single ward, in every single polling station in the United Kingdom is suspect. This is not one disgruntled, thank God in my view, this is not one disgruntled BNP candidate. This is a question that calls into the question the whole electoral system of the United Kingdom, and Sir Howard's explanation doesn't do it for me. It doesn't do it for me. Just after 20 to 2 on BBC Radio Manchester. The news headlines with... hang on. With one of our reporters.
A teenager's had more than 50 staples in his head after being assaulted with a bottle in Oldham Town Centre. His skull was fractured and he suffered bleeding to his brain. And the former Manchester City footballer Joey Barton's been released from prison. The Newcastle United manager Kevin Keegan, though, says he's going to give him a second chance. Manchester's weather fine and hot, but there's the chance of thunderstorms later. Highs of 27 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester. 2020 traffic.
No change in Stockport. Buxton Road still looking very heavy indeed at the moment between Regent Road and Grosvenor Street. Not helped by the roadworks in the area, just near to the Stockport College. If you are heading that way, you are going to meet up with some queues, I'm afraid to say. Elsewhere this afternoon in Altrincham, Ashley New Road southbound still closed off between Cross Street and Ashley Road. That's a roadworks too, so there is a diversion for you to follow. Shore Road in Royton closed as well for resurfacing work between Oldham Road and Edge Lane Street, so you might want to allow yourself some extra time to follow the diversion. And in Bolton, Bridgeman Place still closed off after that fire last week between Butchergate and Carlton Street. Traffic does seem to be moving well though, as it does on the motorways actually as well. There's no problems, no major queues on the motorways to contend with. Anything you spot though and you want to update us, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Maria Jackson.
Mornings sound better with Eamon O'Neill and Diane Oxbury.
Eamon and Diane.
We've been asking you what you think about babies' names.
He's named after my husband's favourite film.
Lassie.
He's named after my husband's favourite film.
Oi! Sound of music! Get in here now!
Eamon and Diane and you.
We decided that our first child we would want at the back end of the summer. And we were given it by the gods because he was born in the September. We were looking at the calendar thinking, what can we do? And realised he was born in the middle of July, August, September, October, November. So we called him Jason.
The station with Eamon and Diane for breakfast.
Need both hands for that one.
Back tomorrow morning from 6 at BBC Radio Manchester. BBC Radio Manchester. Sports with Will Perry.
Good afternoon. Well, some interesting news regarding the Salford City Reds new stadium. The developers have this afternoon gone into administration However, the Rugby Football League say it isn't concerned, and the club insists the stadium will be built on time. Or BBC Radio Manchester's Mark Elliott has more details.
The 22,000 capacity stadium by the M60 at Barton was being planned by Red City Development at a cost of £35 million. It was part of a regeneration project including a hotel and shopping unit. But just days after Salford was awarded a 3-year Super League franchise, the development firm was placed into administration. Despite that, both the club and the RFL say they're satisfied the project will go ahead as planned, saying the situation is a technicality. The stadium's due to be completed by 2010.
Well, Brian Noble has admitted he's feeling the pressure after Wigan lost their third game in a row. Warriors were jeered off from the pitch after losing at home to Huddersfield, and Noble knows results must improve.
It's probably the flattest spot that I've had since I've been here, you know, after continually climbing with the team. And pressure's there every week, but I put myself under that pressure. We have a new owner here, and, you know, he'll be asking questions.
St Helens have announced they've appointed Kieran Purtill as assistant to head coach Mick Potter for next season. It will be a return to Knowsley Road for Purtill, who's currently in caretaker charge at Huddersfield Giants, and he says he had no hesitation in accepting Saints' offer.
When a club like St Helens comes in, it's equivalent to Manchester United coming for you, and it doesn't take a lot of persuading to go there. I've got a coaching plan from my own career. I thought at this stage in my career it was a bit too soon to be a head coach. The key is being patient. I've got plenty of time ahead of me, and I need to gain some more experience and learning, and I think that's the key to it.
Well, an internet campaign's been set up to support Trafford 400-metre hurdler Rick Yates, who's been left out of the British Olympic squad. He won the Olympic trials and achieved the Olympic B standard, which means he could have been picked. At this weekend's London Grand Prix event at Crystal Palace, he ran a lifetime best and achieved not only an A standard for Beijing, but put him 8th on the British all-time list for the event. But UK Athletics say they still won't take him. Well, straight after the race, Yates said he wasn't surprised because he doesn't train with one of the UK Athletics training groups.
Our group has had like that in the past from UK Athletics, so it wasn't really anything new to me because I trained with Andrew Steele and it's taken him a while to break through, even though he's been running the times for a while, so it was nothing I didn't expect, but there's nothing I can do about it. My coach just told me to let my legs do the talking, and I think I did that today.
He sounds like Allan Beswick after his walk up the stairs to the canteen. Some football news now. Inter Milan have completed their signing of Ghanaian international Sully Mantari from Portsmouth. The fee is thought to be in the region of £12.5 million. Liverpool are expected to complete the £18 million signing of Robbie Keane within the next 24 hours. It's understood that the Tottenham striker has undergone a medical at Anfield today. On the other side of Liverpool, Everton striker Andy Johnson is undergoing a medical at Fulham. That's ahead of a planned £12 million deal. Aston Villa say Wilfred Boomer has undergone surgery on his horrific dislocated ankle. Successful surgery, that is. The defender's expected to be out between 4 to 6 months. Manager Martin O'Neill says Freddie is in good spirits. Well, another Freddie who could be in good spirits is Freddie Flintoff. The Lancashire and England all-rounder could be paid £1 million if he plays in the Indian Premier League. That's the view of the chairman and commissioner of the IPL, Lalit Modi. He told the BBC that Freddie would be a top choice if available.
We have paid salaries of close to £750,000 to £800,000 to players who are participating in the Indian Premier League. So it all depends on the franchisees. If he thinks that Kevin Peterson or Flintoff is worth that while, I'm sure he will go out and pay for it.
Well, the England and Wales Cricket Board are pressing ahead with their own plans to stage the Champions League later this year. They won't be attending Wednesday's meeting in Mumbai to discuss the Indian proposals for the tournament. Meanwhile, former Lancashire and England captain Mike Atherton has criticised England's under-fire cricket selectors, saying Steve Harmison's recall to the Test squad sends a terrible message. Darren Pattinson's inclusion at Headingley raised eyebrows, but Atherton says the recall of Harmison for Wednesday's third Test at Edgbaston is as uninspiring as his recent record in international cricket and his attitude. And finally, in golf, the 20-year-old amateur Chris Wood has opted to follow in the footsteps of Justin Rose. Wood finished 5th in the Open 8 days ago and has this morning decided to turn professional.
Talking sense every lunchtime. Allan Beswick and you.
BBC Radio Manchester.
What's going on for 10 to 2 on BBC Radio Manchester? 0161228 2255. Derek in Manchester. Hi.
Hi, Alan. You all right?
I'm not bad at all. What can we do for you?
Did you have a good holiday?
Fabulous, huh?
Right. Well, I've just heard you read that. The letter I sent you in out.
Oh, you're that Derek?
I'm that Derek, yeah.
Right.
And I must admit, I appreciate the fact that you have actually read it out, because I spoke to you a few weeks ago regarding this, and you did ask me to...
What do you think of Sir Howard Bernstein's explanation?
Well, I think exactly the same as you just mentioned there. I mean, I actually wrote in my letter to Sir Howard that basically I think the only way this polling officer could have got all those bulky items out of that box is if he'd been Houdini, or you said Paul Daniels, I said Houdini.
Yeah, well, okay.
I mean, to me, it was an absolutely ridiculous sort of excuse for what was actually tampering with the ballot box. The seals were changed mid-election.
Well, they were changed according to Sir Howard.
According to them, but no one's got any way of actually proving that.
Well, according to him, they were and this is what was told to him. He's only investigated it. But according to him, the seals were changed between 8 and 9 when the polling station inspector, you know who that is, so I won't go into the detail, but when the PSI arrived, was told by the presiding officer that the box was not properly sealed, and it then became clear that it needed to be, and the PSI instructed them, with information from headquarters, for want of a better term, that it should now be sealed thoroughly with the new seals that were available. They were available because they hadn't been put on earlier.
Yeah, but I mean, the explanation is ridiculous in itself. But I mean, what makes it worse is I actually had a phone call at about 7:45 off sort of prospective voters who were saying, look, we've just been round to vote for you, we can't because they won't let us. Now, I immediately went round to the polling station to find out what was going on, and I was told that it was something to do with the postal ballot lists. And, I mean, basically, that was Labour's big bloody scam a couple of years ago, wasn't it? But it was something to do with the posting ballot list. This guy of 40 years' experience couldn't understand them, but now he'd sorted it out. Now, that's what he told me at 8:45.
Well, again, according to Sir Howard's explanation, which I read out earlier, so I'm not going to go into.
No.
But according to his explanation, only one person fell into that category, and that one person did actually manage to cast their vote 5 minutes after being told that they could not. Now, I don't want you to give them to me here, but do you have the names and addresses of people who were unable to cast their vote on that day when they were properly listed on the electoral register?
I have one. As I say, if that's the same person that went back, I don't know, because I haven't...
Well, that person... It can't be that person, because that one person did cast their vote.
That person did vote, yeah.
Right, so you're telling me that a number of people told you that, but you never managed to get their name and address off them?
Well, no, not at 7:15 in the morning. No, I didn't, no. I must admit I didn't. But as I say, I mean, we thought, thinking that we'd go around and get it resolved straight away, which, according to Howard Bernstein, there was only one person that didn't vote. But,
well, no, that's wrong. Sir Howard Bernstein does not say there was only one person that didn't vote. Sir Howard Bernstein...
No, he said they voted later.
Sir Howard Bernstein says that there was no person who did not vote who presented themselves to vote.
Yeah, I mean, well, at the end of the day, if that's what he says, then I can't do anything but believe it. And also...
But you can't offer any... I mean, Derek, you know how
I... offer any proof, no.
You can't offer any evidence to support your broader allegation that you made just a few moments ago, and that is that there were a number of them.
Yeah,
you cannot support
I had
okay, well, let us say that issue, until someone comes up with some more evidence, and you appear to have none, that issue is resolved. We're still back with the damaged seals on the ballot box. Now, personally, I'm not an intimate associate of ballot boxes, but I cannot see how a ballot box can be opened and stuff removed from it without the seals being broken. But that is the explanation we've been given, and I can't see that.
Absolutely. And I would say it was damn near impossible.
Well, I'm glad you said damn near, because...
The items that were listed were all bulky items, books of ballot papers, signs that go around the polling station, the other seals that should have gone back on the box.
Well, yes, but you see, all of those things, because there's not just one box. There are sometimes two. It depends on how busy the region is expected to be. So let us assume there were two. It's perfectly possible that all the stuff you talk about, the bulky items, were in that one box. But frankly, I don't think you should be able to get one sheet of A5 paper out of a ballot box without breaking the seal? Because if you can,
then it's open to whether anything was removed from it can't be said. But at the end of the day, in a private ballot, in a supposedly private ballot, secret ballot, then no one should be able to, as you just said, move one single piece of paper, because that leaves it open to finding out who's voted, what they voted for, or even if someone wanted to, removing ballot papers, destroying them, whatever.
All right, well,
absolutely.
We shall have to wait and see.
Well, we've already got the results of the inquiry. The police don't want to know. I've got a letter from the police saying that as far as they're concerned, they're quite happy with that explanation. I've got a letter from Howard Bernstein saying that that is the end of the investigation. Nothing further is
well, that's fine.
Which is fine. But at the end of the day, it leaves me a little bit with a little bit of a bitter taste in it.
What I am hoping to do, and I can't guarantee that this will happen, what I am hoping to do is to get access to a ballot box. You can rent them, you can borrow them from local authorities, to get access to a ballot box, to get it sealed in the way that it would normally be sealed, not with all the stuff in, just with one piece of paper in, and to see if I can get it out without breaking the seal.
That'd be absolutely brilliant.
That's what I hope to do. We shall have to wait and see. You've got about another 5 seconds, Derek.
Right, well, while you're on, I was just going to mention the woman that was on before, Nora. She's absolutely typical of most of the people I've seen in the Labour Party in Manchester Town Hall. And if you can't call that sort of dictatorship, I don't know what you can. I mean, Manchester Council...
Derek, I think as a member of the BNP, you're not really in a very good position.
Well, I am, because my party's not like that.
The end of that sentence had some interest in it, so I'll do it again. As a member of the BNP, you're not really in a position to say that the impression you get of the party from that one individual is not really very nice, because frankly, there are a number of people in your party who, frankly, I wouldn't wee on if they were burning.
Well, I bet every party's got the same problems, haven't they? But I mean, at the end
I
of the
rest
day,
my case, Derek. I rest my case. Every party, Derek, every party has exactly the same problem. I agree with you. What you said about the earlier caller pertains entirely to your party and all the others. Good on you, Derek.
Can I just mention one thing before you go?
I told you had 5 seconds. You chose how you wanted to use them. Colin in Royton, hi.
Hello, Alan.
What have you got?
Right, about the union.
Go on.
Right? Well, the first thing, the stupid Labour Party built a parliament for them, didn't they?
I don't know what you mean by the union at the moment.
Well, the union means Great Britain.
Oh, right.
The British Isles. The union,
all right.
The union.
I know what you mean now, but when you said the union, I was thinking of the Transport and General or something. So,
no,
the United Kingdom, go on.
United Kingdom, the union together, right? We're all together.
Yeah.
If this all started breaking up again, I would say in 1917, when we were in full-blown war with the Germans, the Irish rebelled, right? The IRA, the Irish rebelled, so we give them independence. We kept the North, right? That's when it all started breaking up. All the people who were born before 1917 were still allowed British citizenship. So in other words, all the Irish, my generation, my ancestors came here. They all came here. They still kept coming here. They could come here and not bother about passports.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So then we get on. So we built a parliament in Northern Ireland. We gives independence to the south. We gets independence, Northern Ireland, which is the most loyalist part of the British Isles, by the way, Northern Ireland. Whatever anybody says, they're more loyal to the Queen than anybody, because of this country. They've fought in every war for us, up there in the north.
Well, that's not universal. Colin, that's not universally the case. Quite a lot of people from Northern Ireland would have happily blown the Queen to bits, and some people from Northern Ireland blew her uncle to bits.
They built him, I know that.
Well, to say that they're more loyal than anywhere else, frankly, parts of that statement need to be questioned.
Wait a minute, who blew the Queen? Who blew Mountbatten up? Who did it?
Well, we don't yet.
The IRA blew her up.
Well, yes, but the IRA exists.
The Northern Ireland people.
Colin, the IRA existed in the north as well as the south.
Yes, but why why did it exist? It wouldn't. It would have kept down.
We're getting into a much more complicated.
You're about now about the union.
Yeah,
right?
you have 5 seconds, Colin.
Right, I'll give you this. Okay, first of all, Labour should never have given them a parliament. Today, in this modern times, you can fly down to London in 25 minutes.
All right, that's your say. I said you had 5 seconds. You got about 11, and you didn't say much in any of them. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day. Ta-da now.
Take one portion of bickering,
A couple of mild disagreements.